الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أم تقولون إن إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق ويعقوب والأسباط كانوا هودا أو نصارى قل أأنتم أعلم أم الله ومن أظلم ممن كتم شهادة عنده من الله وما الله بغافل عما تعملون تلك أمة قد خلت لها ما كسبت ولكم ما كسبتم ولا تسألون عما كانوا يعملون صدق الله العظيم. Respected elders, dear brothers and sisters, regarding ayat number 140 of Surat al-Baqarah, one of the claims of the Yahud and Nasara, the Jews and Christians, was that they used to claim that Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ismail alayhi salam, Ishaq alayhi salam, Yaqub alayhi salam, and all of the tribes and the prophets that came after them, they were Yahud and Nasara, that they were Jews and Christians. We went over the historical relevance to this claim with regards to the history of the Yahud, the Jews, and the Jewish tribes, and also the historical background or relevance of the Nasara, the Christians. But they were called Nasara because the Christians, they were called Nasara because they were helpers of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. And it was kind of a term that he used for them, his disciples, that he wanted them to be recognized as those who helped the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also who stood up in protecting the life of a Nabi or a Rasul, a prophet and messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The details are mentioned there in Surah As-Saf, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, he asked his Hawariyin, his disciples, إذ قال عيسى بن مريم, when Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, he said, للحواريين, to the Hawariyin, to his disciples, Man ansari ila Allah, that who will help me regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or who will help me in the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قال الحواريون نحن أنصار الله. The Hawariyun, or the disciples, they said that they will be those, نحن أنصار الله, they said we will be the helpers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or we will help the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فآمنت طائفة من بني إسرائيل وكفرت طائفة. So a group of the Bani Israel, they believed and they held on to this claim. And another group, they disbelieved. But you have to understand the socio-political conditions of that time. And this was a time where the Romans had come and they had taken over that area. And that time the Romans were, or also the Greeks, they were of the Greek mythology and the Greek belief. And they were mushrikeen, they used to believe in many, many gods at that time. So for them, this deen of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, this muwahid belief, the belief in one Allah, the belief in the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to them this was very alien, and they used to consider the da'wah of this deen, the spreading of this deen, as a crime. And they also had their hands in the assassination of other Anbiya alayhim salam and Rusul of that time. That is why Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam in his life, he kept his da'wah very limited. He did not come out into the open very often. And he even kept his identity very secret at times. Because of the political situation of that time and the hukum of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue doing da'wah, but do it in a very secret manner. And this was very similar to the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In the very early days of his da'wah, where he kept his da'wah very limited to a small group of Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, and it was not made public. So Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, when he was informed that the Romans have caught wind of his da'wah and they were coming and plotting against him, one of his own disciples was involved in alerting the Romans to his whereabouts. So Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, he had a supper with the Hawariyin, with his disciples, and after that supper, it's a very famous incident in the Christian beliefs, the final supper. But after that, he asked his Hawariyin, his disciples, that the situation that we're going to face, this will be a time of very great difficulty and struggle. You will have to sacrifice for your deen. So who's ready to give that sacrifice? Who's ready to help the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and give sacrifice? We know from the Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the very early days of that da'wah, anyone that would accept Islam was put through struggles and made to sacrifice. The famous stories of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, especially those that were in slavery, what kind of difficulties they faced. Even those that were not in slavery, how much opposition they had and how much difficulty they faced. They gave a lot of sacrifice, and yet they did not give up their deen. We might be thinking why, but this is the reality of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there's also the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this world. You go and study any success story, go and see behind how much sacrifices were given to get to that position. Look at any political movement, look at any political ideology, look at any religious movement, any religious ideology. And even go down to the individual cases, go to any individual who became successful, this famous statement, from rags to riches. This is a very, very common statement in the lives of those that have made it. There are many, many obstacles in this world that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. So this applies to every movement. In the case of Islam and Muslims at the time of Sahaba radiallahu anhum. It started from day one, from the very beginning. The sacrifices were given in the early days. That is how Islam spread to the four corners of the world. And people were ready to sacrifice, and people understood the value of that sacrifice. For the Nasara, for the Christians, sacrifice was there, but it came much later. Of those 12 disciples, some were crucified, some believed, some went into the shadows because of their belief. And some played treachery, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also made them pay for their treachery. Later on in other societies, you read the history of the Christians or the Nasara. And later on, when this deen spread, at that time it was very pure, the Nasara. They kept it very, very pure, very close to the teachings of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, which was actual Islam. The book had not been corrupted at that time. The Injil was with them. And for hundreds of years in secrecy, they were keeping this deen. And slowly it started gaining traction and became established in Yemen. This is some 250, almost 300 years after Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam was raised up to the heavens. Islam became established there. And that was during the time of the king of that time, Yusuf Nawas, and some of the others, and there came the famous incident of the boy and the king. But what sacrifices that boy gave? And after his sacrifices, how the deen spread. And what dhulm that king Yusuf Nawaz did on his own people. But even after that, Christianity at that time, the Nasara at that time, they continued to give da'wah and continued to spread. But at that time, it was very pure. It was very, very, very close to the teachings of Islam that we had. Later on, those teachings were then corrupted by others and changed, and changes were made. And this was also to destroy the purity of that system that was adopted by the Nasara, and also to destroy that purity of the Islam of that time. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to bring back and revive the purity of Islam. As Islam in its original pure state has always been there in human history. Anytime some group came or some people came or some force came that almost annihilated the purity of Islam, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would then send a Nabi or a prophet to revive that purity. Finally, that was given to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the pure form of Islam. And also the final and complete version of Islam. And that responsibility was given to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and then to the Tabi'een and Tabi Tabi'een and the Jamhur ulama, and the scholars. There has always been critique and criticism of those who make this effort from day one. How much Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, how much he was criticized by the Quraysh and by the other kuffar and disbelievers. How much the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, how much they were criticized by the disbelievers. And going all the way till today, how much the scholars are criticized. Especially those that do the effort properly with sincerity. So you will always find people, and not just from the disbelievers, sometimes even from amongst the Muslims. You'll find groups of people who try and find fault with the ulama and the scholars. But the sincere ulama, the sincere scholars, they always stand firm on this effort of deen. The effort of Islam and the effort of da'wah. As this is the effort of the Anbiya alayhimus salam, prophets and messengers. Yes, times will change, conditions will change, situations will change, society will change. But the effort of da'wah does not change. The mode of giving da'wah does not change. There are some principles in life, in all walks of life, where the main foundations, they don't change. Yes, they adapt and they can be adapted to different situations. But even throughout the history of Islam, throughout our own history as Muslims, how many times the effort of da'wah was revived over and over. During the time of the Tabi'een, there was an effort to revive this form of da'wah. Then time came of the time of ilm, knowledge. So different modes of ilm and knowledge was revived by the Tabi'een. We have the great fuqaha, how they compiled Quran and Sunnah. Became a mode of da'wah for the Muslims of that time. And from that, the scholars, they started branching out. And then came the effort of hadith, the preservation of ahadith. After the time of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah, the effort was put into ahadith by the great scholars of hadith. The famous Imam Bukhari or Sahih Bukhari. And then you have all of the other books of ahadith. But even before that, the ahadith were also preserved by memory, and the memory of the fuqaha and the memory of the scholars of that time. Then effort came on Quran, and then other funun and other sciences. They were compiled and a system was made. So the effort of da'wah has always been there. Then came a very famous golden age of purity, where a lot of effort was made on self-rectification. And scholars of that time made an effort in the ummah for self-rectification of the Muslims of that time. Different titles were given to that effort. Tazkiyatun Nafs and Tasawwuf and whatever other titles you may find. But the reality was, the effort was to purify da'wah and to bring Muslims back on the deen of Islam. Because often a time in society when there's excess of wealth and excess of comfort and luxuries, so generally the deen of the people starts to go down, the effort of the deen. Because people feel comfortable. This world is not a paradise, but when it becomes kind of a paradise, so people feel comfortable. And they start to lose the sight or the importance of giving sacrifice. So time of tazkiyah was revived, how to purify the people, bring people back on the deen. And then after that effort came amongst the ulama, and from the ulama it passed on. A system was made for this effort, the effort of da'wah. Until today we have all those modes of da'wah. So this deen, the effort of deen has always been pure. And anytime it has been corrupted, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send prophets and messengers. So the Yahud and Nasara in the early years, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first kept this deen amongst Anbiya alayhim as-salam and the prophets and messengers, and the nation that they were sent to until the time of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. After Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, there were many nations that came about, different tribes. So the deen of Islam was limited to the Yahud and the Bani Israel. So the effort of da'wah was also in the Bani Israel by the prophets and messengers. And then came Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, who was also from the Bani Israel. But his efforts slowly extended to tribes outside of the Bani Israel also. Even though his da'wah was for the Bani Israel only, but they were not accepting at that time. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to all of mankind. So this claim that the prophets before, that they were Yahud and Nasara, this claim has no standing. The Bani Israel, we've already gone over their history. They were the children of Yaqub alayhi salam, grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So there was no way that even Yaqub alayhi salam was from the Bani Israel. Rather, he was the father of the Bani Israel. And that was his title also. Israel was his own title, his laqab. So his father Ishaq alayhi salam and his grandfather Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, there was no way that they could have been Yahud. And there was no prophet that was ever of the Nasara or a Christian in any way. at least from the religious sense, from aqidah and belief sense. So what were they? Even in the revealed scriptures, it is made very clear that they were submissive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I was given a title or a name, Deen Ibrahim or Millat Ibrahim. The Millat, the Deen of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, which was actually Islam, and they were Muslim. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers and gives an answer to this claim of the Bani Israel also. Am taqulun, or are you saying, meaning the Yahud and the Nasara, the Jews and Christians, that are you saying, Inna Ibrahim wa Ismail wa Ishaq wa Yaqub wa al-Asbata kanu hudan wa Nasara. Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ismail alayhi salam, Ishaq alayhi salam, Yaqub alayhi salam, Wal-Asbat, and the many, many prophets that were sent to the nations afterwards, and the communities afterwards. Kanu hudan wa Nasara. Are you claiming that they were Yahud and Nasara? Are you claiming that they were of these religious ideologies that you people have made and you have corrupted? We'll give them a very simple answer. أَأَنْتُمْ أَعْلَمُ أَمِ اللَّهُ. Ask them very clearly, ask the Jews and Nasara, that do you know best, or does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best? And it's very obvious. Yahud and Nasara, even they will claim that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows best. And when that is the case, ask them to bring their scriptures. Even today, ask them, bring your scriptures. Where does it say that any of the prophets of the past were Jews and Christians? As far as belief is concerned, tribal association is something else. But as far as belief is concerned, where did they claim? What was their religion? What was the adyan of the nation of the Anbiya alayhim salam of the past? What was their deen? Go read their own scriptures. Even in their scriptures made very clear, even till today. So if you ask them to bring their scriptures and point it out, and they even read their own scriptures, it'll become very clear to them that all of the Anbiya alayhim salam of the past, and all of the Anbiya alayhim salam in totality, all of them were Muslim. وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ كَتَمَ شَهَادَةً عِنْدَهُ مِنَ اللَّهِ. Tell them very, very clearly also that you're going to read your scriptures and don't lie about anything, don't hide anything. Because وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ, who can be more oppressive? Or in this case, who can be more sinful and who can be even more punished more severely? مِمَّنْ كَتَمَ شَهَادَةً, who hides the witness, or who's trying to hide the reality. عِنْدَهُ مِنَ اللَّهِ, that which is with them from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who's trying to hide this truth that is with them from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even in their own scriptures, all these priests, all these rabbis, they know. It's written right there in the scriptures. Yes, it's written in translation format. So it doesn't use the word Islam, it doesn't use the word Muslim. If they go back to the original sources, so these words are there. But they have their translation, from one translation to the next translation. And the reality of translations is that once you get to the third or fourth translation of different languages, even the very meaning and the essence of the words change. But the message is still the same. In the case of the Torah, it changed from Hebrew or Aramaic, it went from Hebrew down to whatever other languages. And from there, now we have the English format. Even they claim that the originals are lost or that they're locked up and only very few people have access to the original Torah. Same is the case with the Injil. How many translations and additions they have of the Injil. With all of these translations, went from one language to another language, from the Hebrew to Latin to Greek to whatever other languages. Now you have the English format. And whatever other formats, if you take it back to the original formats, you can find those words there. So Islam and Muslims will be there. Or even the basic, even till today, the message is still there that these prophets, they submitted their will to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even in the Bible today, their own words. Many a time they stand by these words that even Isa alayhi salam, Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, they claim that Jesus, peace be upon him, even he said, I do not do of my own accord, rather I do of the will of Father in heaven, meaning I have submitted my will to Father in heaven. They're translations of the words. Literally, like we say, Aslamtu li Rabbil Alameen, that I have submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, my will. Of course, they will not be ready to admit that this is the word Islam or the words Muslim until they go back to the original source. Once you go back to the original source, so then you'll find these words there. Even today, if you look at the Arabic translation of the Bible and the Arabic translation of their books, you'll find Islam and Muslims and even the word Allah. It is all there. Even the Arabs amongst them who are Christians and Jews who speak the Arabic language, they find the words there very clearly. There's no doubt whatsoever. But shaitan, he has a unique way of deceiving people. And also another thing, hidayah and guidance, it is very, very valuable. And we understand that things that are valuable, they're very expensive. Not everyone can afford them. And they're not given to everyone. So hidayah also, this is not given to everyone. You have to have sincerity and you have to be sincere. Then yes, you can have hidayah and guidance. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes one thing very clear. That tell them, وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ كَتَمَ شَهَادَةً عِنْدَهُ مِنَ اللَّهِ. Who can be more oppressive than one who's hiding the witness and trying to hide the truth, that truth which is with them from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And understand the reality, وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's not heedless from your actions. Don't think that you can hide the truth and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't know or He won't know. He knows all of your actions. He knows everything that you're doing, everything that you plan to do. So don't think that you'll get away with this deception. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will deal with your deception. And you'll have to face the results of hiding the truth. The time will come. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding and give all of us the tawfiq to practice His deen. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ. So we'll do hadith. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: فضلت على الأنبياء بست، أعطيت جوامع الكلم، ونصرت بالرعب، وأحلت لي المغانم، وجعلت لي الأرض طهورا ومسجدا، وأرسلت إلى الخلق كافة، وختم بي النبيون، وكما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. رواه مسلم. So regarding this hadith of Sahih Muslim, Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, he narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam has said that I have been given superiority or privilege over the other Anbiya alayhim as-salam and the other prophets and messengers with 6 privileges. One is that I've been given Jawami'ul Kalim, the very comprehensive words, where in a few words I can have very, very deep meaning. And I've been helped with ru'b or fear that is struck into the hearts of the enemies. And the maghanim or the spoils of war have been made halal for me. And they were not halal for the nations of the past. And the whole world, the whole earth has been made a place of purity and a masjid for me, where I can purify myself and also pray salah. The 5th privilege or prestige that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, فَأُرْسِلْتُ إِلَى الْخَلْقِ كَافَّةً, and have been sent to all of mankind. And the sixth privilege, وَخُتِمَ بِيَ النَّبِيُّونَ, and I am the seal of prophethood. So I am the seal of all prophets. These two are kind of combined. One is the effort of da'wah, which we went over already. That Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he was sent to all of mankind, not just to the mankind at his time, but till the day of judgment. So this effort of da'wah has been passed on to us. There are some principles of this effort that we have to understand, and we have to go into this effort. But one reality of this principle is that you have to spend time to understand this effort. You have to become part of the effort. Now, there are some things in life that you can speak about, but the reality only dawns on a person when they get involved in it. You can sit there and read about it all you want. You can prepare yourself all you want, but until you actually go through it, you don't understand what it is. I'll give you a simple example like Hajj, for those who have had the privilege of going for Hajj. So before you go, you can go through so many seminars, talking about the first time you do Hajj. So you go through so many seminars, and you can read so many books, and you can even take booklets and books with you to do Hajj. Once you get there and you actually start, it's a whole different world. All of those seminars, all of those books and booklets and everything that you learned, you realize how useful they really are, because it's a whole different world. And almost everyone makes some mistake, at least in their first Hajj, or in most times they do Hajj, there's some mistake always. But the reality is that it's a different world, and because it's a different world, it's a different situation, different conditions you face during Hajj, where no seminar or no book can prepare you for that. It's a practical thing. Similarly, that's how da'wah works. So you're involved in it practically. You can read all you want about it. You can listen to all of the lectures you want. You can listen to everything you want, but the reality of it will only dawn on you once you get involved in the effort of da'wah. And there are many who critique and criticize the effort as if they want to make some kind of changes to the effort. But those who have actually gone through the effort and who are involved in the effort, you will never find critique or criticism from them. Why? Because they're involved in it and they understand what it is. But for someone who has not gone through it, they have their own, they'll always have their reservations or their own ideas or whatever else might be there. So we always tell people that if you really want to understand what is the effort of da'wah, go spend some time with this effort, then you will understand. And if you really want to spend some time with this effort, it's best to do it in your own locality, to do it under the supervision of the ulama and the scholars within your locality. Because that is one unique thing about the effort of da'wah. Giving da'wah in one locality will be very different than giving da'wah in another locality. Here in the United States of America, it has different demands. So da'wah will work very differently than giving da'wah. Giving da'wah in the United States of America has its own set of protocols and its own set of rules versus giving da'wah in other countries. There was a time where there was a lot of critique of the effort of da'wah in the United States because there was not many people joining the effort. I'm talking about 15, 20 years back. Everyone was criticizing the effort of da'wah. That why is the effort of da'wah done on the Muslims only when in America we have so many non-Muslims? So there was different groups and organizations that formed that started focusing on giving da'wah to the non-Muslims. And a lot of focus shifted away from giving da'wah to Muslims or making an effort in the Muslim community. There was small groups which also consisted of many ulama and scholars that were telling everyone that We need to focus on the Muslims in this society and in this country, because we have not brought complete deen in the lives of every single Muslim here. Before you focus on the non-Muslims, you have to first have complete deen in the lives of all the Muslims. And unfortunately, we hardly had 100% of deen in all of the lives of the Muslims. There was a lot of, so that focus was slowly shifted away from the Muslims. That no, Muslims are okay in this country. Now we're seeing the effects of that. When the scholars were telling everyone to focus on giving da'wah to the Muslims and bringing the Muslims, do mudhakara and spread the deen and ilm and knowledge amongst the Muslims first, let them come to Islam completely. That is a demand in the Quran, or a command mentioned in the Quran. Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu dukhulu fi silmi kaffa. For those of you who believe, enter into the fold of Islam completely, 100%. But that wasn't done. Everyone had their criticism of anyone who was trying to give da'wah to the Muslims, or trying to do mudhakara with the Muslims, to bring the Muslims back. Those groups were criticized and looked down on. So that effort almost came to an end of making an effort on the Muslims in this country. A lot of the focus was then shifted to the non-Muslims, that let's spread Islam amongst the non-Muslims. And now we're seeing the effects of that. A lot of the youth are slowly leaving Islam. A lot of those that the effort was made on the non-Muslims came to Islam, they accepted Islam. But there was no support system. There was no real strong support system amongst the Muslims to keep those non-Muslims in Islam when they accepted Islam. That is why it's an important point to have a da'wah system as far as mudhakara, reminder and ilm, and a system amongst the Muslims, so if somebody does enter into the fold of Islam, they can find support and they can find those who will be able to help them and support them. But even those that accepted Islam, they did not find that support system. We don't know where many of them are now. That is the reality of what happened. So it's very, very important that we involve in an effort before we have any critique of that effort. So we will go over some of the points of this effort. But again, the reality of this effort is that we as Muslims, in our own societies, in our masajid, and in our gatherings, we need to revive the effort of da'wah. And we need to revive the effort of mudhakara. Because if we don't, then we will never be able to fix the many issues that we have in our society as far as the strength of our deen and establishment of our deen is concerned. In our lives and in the next generation, we have to leave behind a system that has a strong foundation so that Islam will continue to spread and will continue to become more established. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding and give all of us the tawfiq to practice His deen. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ.